March 24, 1945. A muddy field overlooking the Rhine near Wessel. The world is the color of iron and smoke. For 19-year-old Flakhelferin Annelies Schmidt, the only reality is the deafening roar of her own 88mm anti-aircraft gun. The steel beast, once the terror of the skies, now fires desperately at targets it can barely see on the ground. Each blast is a physical blow, a shudder that runs from the frozen mud, through the soles of her worn boots and into her bones. The air stinks of cordite, damp earth, and fear. For 3 days, her world has shrunk to this gun pit. Her comrades, a mix of teenage boys from the Hitler Youth and weary old men from the Volkssturm, are hollow-eyed ghosts caked in filth. They move with the jerky, exhausted motions of puppets whose strings are about to snap. Her mind, a fortress built of propaganda, replays the warnings of her blocklighter, the local party official. The Ami and the Tommy, he had sneered, his voice dripping with contempt, are not soldiers. They are gangsters, criminals, scraped from the gutters of New York and London. They are the tools of the Jewish plutocrats. And the worst warnings were reserved for the women. He had painted vivid, terrifying pictures of what they would do. The words echoed with every incoming shell. Untermenschen, subhumans, beasts who knew only plunder and violation. Her duty was clear. Fight until the last bullet, the last shell. Surrender was not an option. It was a fate worse than death. A glorious death for the Führer and the fatherland was the only honorable end. A sudden, sharp crack splits the air, different from the familiar crump of mortars. It is followed by a ripping, canvas-tearing sound. Machine gun fire. Close, too close. A boy named Klaus, no older than 16, slumps against the gun's breech, a dark stain spreading across the chest of his oversized tunic. He makes no sound. Annelies feels a cold knot tighten in her stomach, but there is no time for grief. The command is screamed, "Feindly infantry, link a flank!" Enemy infantry, left flank. She helps wrench the heavy gun around, its barrel now level with the scarred earth. Through the smoke, she sees them. They are not the goose-stepping, immaculate soldiers of the newsreels. They are low, fast-moving shapes of olive drab, men who seem to flow across the broken ground. The 88 fires with a cataclysmic boom, sending a high-explosive shell screaming into a shattered tree line. Dirt and splinters erupt, but more shapes emerge from the smoke. You hear a sound you have been trained to dread, the metallic ping of an M1 Garand ejecting an en-bloc clip. It is the sound of an American squad reloading. It is the sound of death approaching. Another Volkssturm man to her right cries out and pitches forward. The air is thick with bullets. They snap and whine past the gun shield. This is it. The Götterdämmerung, the twilight of the gods, happening not in a grand opera house, but in a muddy ditch in the rain. The gun falls silent. The last shell is gone. The surviving boys and old men are fumbling with their Karabiner 98K rifles, their hands shaking too badly to work the bolts effectively. Annelies grips the small, crude pistol issued to her, its cold metal a useless comfort. The shapes are closer now, resolving into individual men. They are tall, broad-shouldered, their faces smeared with grime and exhaustion under their heavy helmets. They carry their rifles with a terrifying ease. She sees the long bayonets fixed to the muzzles. Her heart hammers against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat counting down her final seconds. The blocklighter's voice is a venomous whisper in her ear. This is the moment. They will show no mercy. She raises her pistol, her hand trembling. It is better to choose her own end. But before she can decide, a grenade lands in the gun pit with a dull thud. It is not a German stick grenade. It's a pineapple-shaped Mk2. Smoke billows out, thick and acrid, not shrapnel. A voice, rough and guttural, bellows in a language she barely understands, but whose meaning is universal. Out! Get out now! Hände hoch! Hands up! Through the stinging smoke, a figure looms over her. He is huge, a giant in a muddy uniform. The face beneath the helmet is streaked with black, his eyes hard and empty. He levels his garand at her chest. For a terrifying, eternal second, Annalise stares into the dark muzzle of the rifle, then up into the eyes of the monster she was told was coming. She closes her own, waiting for the blast that will end everything. The blast never comes. Instead, a rough hand grabs the pistol from her grasp and shoves her forward, out of the gun pit. Annalise stumbles onto the churned-up earth, her hands instinctively rising into the air. The American soldier, the monster from the propaganda posters, barely gives her a second glance. He is already focused on the next task, his movements economical and professional. He and his squad are disarming the others, the trembling teenagers, the dazed old men. There is no ceremony, no taunting, just a grim efficiency. They are rounded up, their hands laced behind their heads and prodded into a ragged line. The battle has already moved on. The sounds of fighting are receding into the distance. The war for them is over in the space of 5 minutes. Annalise risks a glance at her captors. They are not the sneering degenerates she was taught to expect. They are simply tired men. They chew gum methodically. One of them lights a cigarette, his hands cupped against the wind, his movements slow and deliberate. They speak to each other in low, clipped sentences. Their exhaustion seems as profound as her own. They are the victors, but there is no joy on their faces, only a bone-deep weariness. This is the first crack in the foundation of her belief. Monsters were supposed to revel in their victory. These men just look like they want it to be over. They are marched away from the river, away from the smoldering ruins of their position. The journey is a blur of mud and misery. The column of prisoners grows with every hamlet and defensive line they pass. More Flakhelferinnen, nurses in gray uniforms, Volkssturm soldiers limping with wounds, and even civilians caught in the sweep. The sheer scale of the collapse is staggering. This is not a strategic retreat, it is a rout. As they march, another sight begins to work its way into Annalise's consciousness. The Allied supply chain. An endless convoy of GMC CKW trucks, the famous Deuce and a Half, grinds past them, heading east towards the front. They are packed with ammunition crates, fuel cans, and fresh troops. For every German Tiger tank she had seen, there seemed to be 100 American Sherman tanks. For every weary German soldier, there are 10 fresh-faced GIs. The propaganda had spoken of a decadent, weak enemy on the verge of collapse. The reality, rolling past her in a tide of steel and gasoline, is one of overwhelming, inexhaustible power. Germany never stood a chance. The thought is a betrayal, but it is also undeniable. The guards are a shifting presence. They are from an infantry division, perhaps the 9th or the 30th. Their shoulder patches are meaningless symbols to her. They do not speak to the prisoners. They communicate with hand gestures and sharp commands. There is no kindness, but there is also no overt cruelty. When an old Volkssturm man collapses from exhaustion, a medic is called over. The medic, a corporal with a red cross on his helmet, checks the man's pulse, gives him a canteen of water, and directs 2 other prisoners to help him walk. Annalise watches, confused. This is not the behavior of barbarians. Barbarians would have used a rifle butt or simply left him to die. After what feels like an eternity of walking, they arrive at a collection point. It is a vast, open field, hastily enclosed with coils of concertina wire and wooden posts.
Thousands of German soldiers are already there, a sea of field gray uniforms turning the green pasture into a landscape of defeat. They are being processed by military police. Annalise is herded into a line with the other women. You stand there, shivering in the damp cold, as an American officer with a clipboard walks down the line. He is accompanied by a soldier who speaks halting, accented German. Name, unit, rank. The questions are impersonal, bureaucratic. When he gets to Annalise, she gives her details in a small voice. He writes it down without looking at her. She is no longer Annalise Schmidt, gunner. She is a number on a list, a piece of administrative debris in the wreckage of the Third Reich. The dehumanization she expected has arrived, but it is not born of hatred. It is the cold, indifferent dehumanization of paperwork. It is somehow more chilling. As dusk falls, a cold rain begins to slick the mud. There is no shelter. She huddles with a group of other women, their backs to the wind, staring out at the endless expanse of the temporary camp. They are surrounded by the quiet, methodical power of their enemy, and the terrifying truth is beginning to dawn. Everything they were told was a lie.
The first 48 hours in the Rhine-Wiesenlager, the Rhine Meadow Camp, are a lesson in primal misery. There is no barracks, no roof, nothing but the open sky and the mud. The prisoners dig shallow trenches with their hands or pieces of scavenged wood, desperate for some meager protection from the incessant wind and rain. The cold is a living thing, seeping into their clothes and refusing to leave. Hunger gnaws at them, a constant dull ache. The latrines are open pits at the edge of the enclosure, a final stark humiliation. Annalise huddles with two other auxiliaries, a nurse named Helga and a signals operator named Lotta. They share what little body heat they have, their conversations clipped and paranoid. Every rumor spreads like a virus. They will be shipped to Siberia. They will be used for slave labor. They will be starved to death. The old fears, nurtured for years by Goebbels' propaganda machine, find fertile ground in the squalor of the camp. On the third day, the food arrives. It is not the hot soup or black bread they are used to. American trucks pull up to the wire, and soldiers begin tossing down small cardboard boxes. K-rations. When a box lands near Annalise, she opens it with trembling fingers. Inside, she finds a small tin of processed meat, a packet of hard biscuits, a fruit bar, 4 cigarettes, and a packet of instant coffee powder. It is strange, alien food. She bites into a biscuit. It is dry and tasteless, but it is sustenance. She watches as a young GI, a guard no older than herself, walks his patrol along the wire. He catches her eye and, with a slight nod, points to the coffee packet and then mimes pouring it into his mouth. He wrinkles his nose and shakes his head, a universal sign for it's terrible. Then he smirks, a fleeting human expression, before his face becomes a mask of military indifference again. It is a small thing, a moment lasting no more than 3 seconds, but it sends another tremor through Annalise's crumbling worldview. This boy, this enemy, is not a slavering beast. He is a young man doing a boring, miserable job, just like she was. The interaction is unsettling. She had been prepared for hatred, for violence. She was not prepared for this casual, almost gentle disregard. Later that afternoon, a medical jeep pulls up. A medic, a sergeant with tired eyes and a 5 o'clock shadow, enters the women's enclosure with 2 guards. "Anyone injured, wounded?" his translator calls out. Helga, the nurse, has a piece of shrapnel in her arm from the battle, a wound she had crudely bandaged. She is hesitant, suspicious. But the wound is becoming infected, and she steps forward. Annalise watches rapt as the American medic examines the arm. His touch is firm but gentle. He cleans the wound with an antiseptic that makes Helga hiss with pain, his expression remaining one of professional concentration. He speaks in English to his assistant, who hands him a sterile dressing and a roll of bandages. He works quickly and efficiently. When he is done, he gives Helga 2 white pills from a small bottle. For the pain, the translator says, and the fever.
He packs up his kit and moves on to the next section of the camp. Helga returns to their huddle, staring at her cleanly bandaged arm as if it belongs to someone else. "He said nothing," she whispers to Annalise and Lotta. "He just fixed it." That night, the temperature plummets. A biting wind sweeps across the plain. Annalise is shivering uncontrollably, her teeth chattering. The thin blanket she was captured with offers little protection. She wraps her arms around herself, trying to shrink into a smaller and smaller ball. Through the darkness, she sees the silhouette of a guard on his patrol. He stops near their section of the wire, looking out into the mass of huddled figures. It's the same young guard from before. He scans the area, ensuring no officers are nearby. Then, in a swift, underhanded motion, he tosses something over the wire. It lands in the mud a few feet from Annalise. It is a thick, olive-drab U.S. Army blanket. He does not pause. He does not look at them. He simply continues his patrol as if nothing has happened. Annalise crawls forward and pulls the blanket from the mud. It is heavy, coarse, and smells faintly of wool and tobacco. It is also dry and incredibly warm. She brings it back to their small group, and they share it. The three of them huddle under its miraculous warmth. No words are spoken. There is only the profound, earth-shattering shock of an enemy who, in the cold and the dark, chose to show them a sliver of humanity.
Weeks bleed into one another. The routine of the camp becomes a grimly accepted reality. The prisoners are moved from the open fields of the Rheinwiesenlager to a more permanent transit camp in France. This one has tents and a few wooden barracks. The food improves slightly, supplemented with bread and a thin stew. The change in location brings a change in atmosphere. The raw, immediate shock of capture has faded, replaced by a deep uncertainty about the future. Here, the process of indoctrination is replaced by a slow, creeping exposure to a different reality. There are no lectures, no re-education officers trying to force a new ideology upon them. The Allies seem to understand that it would be useless. Instead, they let the truth seep in through cracks in the prisoners' defenses. It starts with the news. A few German-speaking American soldiers will occasionally translate headlines from Stars and Stripes, the U.S. Army newspaper. They read of Allied victories, of the fall of Berlin, of the Führer's suicide in his bunker. To Annalise and the others, it sounds like fiction. The Führer was an immortal figure, the savior of Germany. The idea of him dying a coward's death in a hole beneath the rubble of his capital is inconceivable. They dismiss it as propaganda, a clumsy attempt to break their spirit. But the stories persist, and the guards speak of it with a casual certainty that is hard to ignore. They aren't trying to convince the prisoners. They are simply discussing facts among themselves. The war is over. Germany has surrendered unconditionally. The real psychological blow comes one overcast afternoon in early May. A projector and a screen are set up in the center of the camp. The prisoners are assembled, ordered to sit in the mud and watch. Annalise assumes it will be a film glorifying the American army or mocking the German defeat. She braces herself for it. The projector whirs to life, casting a flickering black and white image onto the screen. There is no triumphant music, no narration at first. Just silent, grainy footage. The camera pans across a barbed wire fence, past a sign that reads Arbeit macht frei. Then it moves inside. What appears on the screen is a vision from hell. Piles of human bodies, stacked like cordwood. Living skeletons in striped pajamas staring blankly at the camera. Their eyes hollowed out by suffering Annalise cannot begin to comprehend. Bulldozers, operated by grim-faced American soldiers, push mountains of emaciated corpses into mass graves. A collective gasp, a wave of revulsion and disbelief ripples through the prisoners. "Fälschung," someone shouts. "A forgery." "Propaganda," another cries out. It has to be fake. This is the ultimate lie, a grotesque movie made to slander the German people. But then the camera focuses on the camp guards who have been captured. They are not Americans in costume. They are clearly German, wearing the uniforms of the SS, the Totenkopfverbände.
Anneliese recognizes the death's head insignia on their collars. She has seen it before on men who were lauded as the elite defenders of the Reich. The narrator's voice finally begins, calm and factual, speaking in German. It names the places, Buchenwald, Dachau, Bergen-Belsen. It explains what these camps were. Not labor camps, not prisoner of war camps, but extermination centers. Anneliese feels sick. Her mind rebels, desperately trying to reject what her eyes are seeing. This cannot be Germany. Her Germany was a nation of poets and thinkers, of clean cities and happy singing children. Her leaders were hard, yes, but they were building a better world, protecting Europe from the Bolshevik hordes. They were not mass murderers. But the images are relentless, undeniable. The evidence is there on the screen, documented by the horrified liberators. She looks around at the faces of the other prisoners. Some are shouting in anger and denial, but many, especially the older ones, are silent. Their faces are pale, their expressions a mixture of horror and a dawning terrible recognition. They had heard whispers. A cousin who worked on the railways, a friend assigned to an SS economic enterprise. They had heard rumors of strange shipments and camps from which no one returned, rumors they had dismissed or been too afraid to question. Now, the whispers have become a roar. The truth, more shocking than any lie about the Allies, is that the monster was not outside the gate. It was at the very heart of the fatherland. That night, no one sleeps. There is only a profound, tomb-like silence as hundreds of women try to reconcile the nation they thought they were dying for with the charnel house it had become.
May 8, 1945. The war in Europe is officially over. The news spreads through the camp not with a bang, but with a quiet, exhausted whisper. There is no celebration among the prisoners, only a vast, empty silence. The weight of unconditional surrender settles upon them, a final, crushing blow to a national identity that has already been shattered. For Anneliese, the end of the war is not a moment of relief, but of profound dislocation. Everything she has ever known, every belief that structured her world, has been systematically dismantled. The Führer is dead. The 1,000-year Reich lasted 12 years. The glorious Wehrmacht is a defeated rabble. And the German people she is now forced to confront were either complicit in or ignorant of the greatest crime in human history. The demeanor of the American guards changes overnight. The tension that always simmered beneath the surface is gone. They are no longer guarding a dangerous enemy. They are managing a humanitarian crisis. They smile more. They talk about going home, about seeing their families in Ohio or Texas. They seem impossibly young, boys dressed in soldiers' uniforms now eager to shed them. Their casualness is almost insulting. They have won, and they are moving on, while Anneliese and the other prisoners are trapped in the rubble of their past, with no future in sight. What is there to go back to? A country in ruins, occupied by foreign armies. A people branded with a collective guilt that feels both monstrously unfair and horribly deserved. The process of repatriation begins. It is a slow, bureaucratic affair. Anneliese is called before an American lieutenant for a final interview. He sits at a makeshift desk in a tent, a stack of files in front of him. He looks tired and overworked. He asks her name, age, and hometown. He asks about her role in the flak service. He types her answers onto a form with 2 fingers. He is not an interrogator trying to extract secrets. He is a clerk processing paperwork. He never looks her in the eye. At the end, he hands her a set of discharge papers and a travel permit. "You are free to go," the translator says flatly. "There will be a truck leaving for the British zone in the morning. Be ready." Free to go. The words sound hollow, meaningless. Free to go where? Her home in Wessel is likely a pile of bricks. Her father is missing on the Eastern Front. Her mother's fate is unknown. The community, the nation, the entire social fabric that had once supported her is gone. As she walks out of the tent, back into the familiar squalor of the camp, she sees a group of GIs gathered around a jeep listening to a radio. A swing tune plays, an impossibly cheerful sound in this landscape of despair. A few of them are tapping their feet. They are citizens of another world, a world that has not been bombed into oblivion, a world that has not had its soul poisoned by a criminal ideology. The shocking truth, Annalise finally understands, was never about how the Allies would treat her. The real shock was the truth about herself and Germany. The enemy was not the simple, gum-chewing American who tossed her a blanket. The enemy was the smiling party official who told her lies. The enemy was the ideology that had turned her neighbors into murderers and her patriotism into a tool for genocide. The enemy was a poison she had willingly drank for years. The next morning, she boards the deuce-and-a-half truck with dozens of other women. It rumbles out of the camp gates, leaving the barbed wire behind. As she looks out at the scarred, defeated landscape of her homeland, she feels nothing. Not anger, not relief, not even sadness. Just a vast, cold emptiness. The war has taken everything from her. Her home, her family, her youth. But the captivity, in its strange and unexpected way, has taken something more. Her certainty. She is 19 years old, and she no longer knows what to believe.